In this presentation, we will set up our service items within QuickBooks Online. Here we are in our Get Great Guitars dashboard. We're now going to be thinking about setting up our service items. So what are service items? Let's think about the function of the service items. What function will they serve? So let's go ahead and take a look at an invoice. We're going to take a look at the new item up top. And notice we have up top our menus now saying money in, money out, other. We have our invoice down here, so we have the send invoice. That's the one we want to take a look at, the invoice screen. Now here is our standard invoice that we would be sending out to somebody. In order for the invoice and sales receipt to be populated easily, we want these products and services to be populated for us. And you'll see now we don't have anything here except for hourly and late and whatnot. We don't have items that we sell or anything like that. What we would like to do is be able to pre-format the types of things that we sell, have them in here. If we have inventory, we would like somebody that doesn't know anything about the bookkeeping system to basically be able to process an invoice and a sales receipt. So if you're imagining them in a store and you're like, hey, someone brings something up to the front of the store, they see what it is, you'd like them to be able to, the person that's at the register that's putting the data into the system, to just simply be able to say, all right, there's the product, and be able to pick up the product, give it the sales receipt and the quantity and so on. If you're at a law office or something like that and you do tax preparation or you do, services, you'd like this information to be populated as easily as possible. And then for the invoice then to be easily created and for it to be easily affect the financial statements without the person that's doing the data input to need to know too much about that process. They just simply do the data input. The major driving force, most important thing, is to have the product and service items set up properly in order to do that. Now, many people don't understand the product or service items, even if they've worked with QuickBooks, because they've never had to do the input side to set up these items from scratch. They just kind of started working within QuickBooks after it's already set up, and therefore you don't really get to see that beginning process. Now that's what we're going to set up now, those items that we're going to be having. We can group them in these two categories, as it says here, either products or services, things we sell, inventory items, or services that we provide, things that we don't have tangible substance, things that we do in terms of service for money. So I'm going to close that back out. We're going to then go down to the sales tab. So we're going to now be in the sales tab. Now the sales tab will probably default to go to the overview tab up top. You'll note we got multiple tabs up top. We're going to be going to the product and services. We want to be in the product and services tab. And as we scroll down, the default gives hourly, late fees, and sales for our services. These are kind of like the defaults. If we just had an hourly rate, we could just populate hourly rate. We can push forward with that. If you just start, using QuickBooks, you can use those items and be able to push forward with them. However, you'd probably want to set up more detailed items in here because that really makes your system a lot easier. It really makes it a lot easier when you're not having to think all the time, even if it's an hourly rate. If you could somehow customize your service so that you have a flat fee rather than an hourly rate, and that gets into different concepts on billing and whatnot like that, but it might be easier to think about because if you're just always mulling over what the hourly rate will be and that kind of thing, it might be easier even on an hourly service or where you provide services to have something other than an hourly rate. But in any case, another discussion for another day. But it would be nice to have the items here, and inventory items we certainly want over here. So that's what we're going to be setting up, more items. Now you could do this in a one-by-one kind of setup if you're just adding one-by-one item. Or you could bulk upload the items into the system. Say you have another accounting system and you're going to enter multiple items into this system and transfer them over. To do that, you can import. So if we scroll back up to the top of the screen, we have the button of new and the drop down and the green icons, which will give you an import option. Let's first take a look at the new. If you were just thinking to add one new item each time, you have the inventory item. So if you have an inventory item, that means that you actually want QuickBooks to track the inventory. You're selling goods, you're selling actual physical things, and you want QuickBooks to be able to track the inventory that's on hand and track the related cost of goods sold as it's being processed. Now, you may not want to do that even though you sell goods for some reason, because it does take more detail and more time to track the inventory in here. So you do have another option, which is non-inventory. Products you buy or sell but don't need to or can't track quantities for example, nuts, bolts used in an installation. So for example, if you're talking about things that you have that you can't really track, such as small things like nuts and bolts that are part of the installation, then you can use a non-inventory item. Then we have these service items, and these are going to be the two different kind of characteristics. If you have inventory, Your question is, do you want to track the inventory within QuickBooks or not, right? And do you want to go through the inventory tracking there, or do you want to use some other system and try to simplify the system with the inventory? And we'll take a look at inventory in a future presentation. Or do you have possibly you have a service item, and that's where you do work for revenue. You don't deal with any inventory. So service that you provide to customers, for example, landscaping, tax preparation services. And then you can bundle these items. So you can put these into a bundled item, which you can then populate on an invoice. And that's a collection of products and or services that you sell together. For example, a gift basket of fruit, cheese, and wine, or something like that. So that's how you can do it one by one. You can enter these in there one by one. We're now going to take a look at the importing these items to actually import them. So to do that, we're going to select the drop down and say, what if I just want to import a bunch of these items? So you have a spreadsheet with these items in it. If you're coming from another accounting software, this is quite likely the case that you might have these items, that you have a list of items and you want to input them. You don't want to do them one at a time because you have multiple items. You have a lot of items that you want to input. So let's go into the import option and see what that would look like. Now then they have the browse item here, and you have the options of uploading an Excel or CSV file. We'll actually take a look at an example of an Excel file. I'm going to download their example file. Now, if you have other items that you want to import, if you want to import these items, then you basically want to tie it out to the screen that is on this Excel file as much as possible, at least the headers. Now, you may not have all of these categories as you go through it. So if you don't have the category, you can leave it blank, or you may not even have the column there, but these are the categories that can be included. So this is just the example, the SKU, the type, the sales price and the rate, the income account, the purchase description. Notice they don't have anything in the income account here, right? The purchase description, purchase cost, the expense account. This is if we sold. Notice this isn't service items because they're dealing with the cost as well. And that means that they're dealing with inventory items. So there's more columns than you might have for service items. Reorder point, when do you want to reorder the items? Inventory asset account, quantity as of. So these are all the fields. Notice they're not all populated here. And so you may have a question like, well, what if I have, a list of service items I want to import and it doesn't line up with this exactly? Will it still basically apply out? Well, you're going to want to try to match the headers up here as much as possible, and it will give an actual experiment of entering this information into Excel and then importing it into the system. And our end product is going to look like this. So it's going to look like this, an Excel file. So it's a pretty simple Excel file. Obviously, if we only had 4 items, we can enter these directly into QuickBooks Online. But we want to just practice this importing feature because many people might have a lot more than 4 service items. And it could actually be easier in some ways to basically populate this information into an Excel sheet and import it. It might be easier just from a data input standpoint if you have multiple items. So it's a similar process, of course, if you just entered a one by one item within QuickBooks Online. We're just going to practice the importing feature here. It's also useful to know the importing feature because you can apply the similar process to other types of information that you might input, such as customers, such as vendors, and now we're looking at the items lists. Okay, so we're going to recreate this in Excel. We'll do it fairly quickly. This isn't an Excel course, but I just want to show you some of the formatting that you want to set up, and then we'll take a look at some of these header line items. Notice I only have 5 items up top, and I'm going to try to import this with just this number of headers and see if we can match that up to what's in the system. So notice I'm not using all the headers, in other words, that are being used here in the example tab. These are all the ones that could be there. We have a more simplified option because we're using service items, not inventory items, and we may not need all the headers in any case. So let's take a look at this. I'm going to close this back out. And then let's bring this back over, and I'm going to just create this in a fresh Excel tab. So I'm going to make a new tab, and that's the other tab's the example tab. We'll make this a bit larger. And I'm going to go through this pretty quickly. I'll just make the header tabs up here. Typically, you're going to need an item name. Now, notice QuickBooks Desktop calls these items. Online has kind of a different name for them. So that's the first thing. I'm going to try to put item name as if it, came from QuickBooks Desktop or some other accounting system. See if we can import that into the items here. Also note that you have some overlap. I could make this column a little bit larger, but I'm just going to keep typing them out and then I'll adjust the column size. So the next one is going to be the sales description. So it's going to be the description of the item. Sales description. Hopefully I spelled that right. And then I have the sales price. These are items that we're going to sell. They're going to populate on the invoice. Then the income account, and then the type. Income account and type. Okay, now I'm going to do a little bit of formatting. I'm going to highlight the columns by selecting column A. So I see the drop down, so it looks like that, not like that, like that, not like that, but like that. And then I'm going to select, hold it down, left click, scrolling over to column D, let go. I'm going to put my cursor in the middle of any of these columns. So I see that little, it changes to that, from this to that. Left click, and I'm going to drag it out a bit. Or you can simply double click on it. I like to drag it out to make them the same size. I'm going to include column E now. I'm going to go from A to E. I should include E here. And then I'm going to make it a little bit larger here. So we make it a little bit larger. And so that should be good. I'm going to highlight this first column only. Going to go to the Home tab, Alignment. I'm going to center it. And then I'm going to make the first column bold by going to the Home tab, Font, and make it bold. And that'll tell the system, hey, look, this is a header column. You need to just indicate in some way, bolding it, that that's a header column. And then I'm going to put the item name. I'm going to say this is a diagnostic. Now, we sell guitars, and a diagnostic seems more like a car term and whatnot, but, bear with me here. We're going to do some kind of diagnostic on the car here, and that's going to be a service item. We're not selling inventory here. The sales description is going to be the same, diagnostic, and we're going to say it's $68. The income account, we're going to say is just service, a service income account, which may not be in the system yet. So once we put it into QuickBooks, we'll see if we can line up the income account. And the type is going to be a service. So let's line that up. So that's going to be our first thing that we sell. The first thing that we want to populate into our invoice is going to be a diagnostic item that we have a set price for, which is just simply going to be $68. Then we're going to have the hour service. This is a set service of some kind. Guitar full service. Again, I'm not exactly sure what that means, but that's going to be another service item we have. And that's going to populate actually on the invoice. So it's going to show up on the invoice. Someone's going to be able to say, oh, you had a guitar full service. Okay, we'll populate that. That comes out at $140. All right, and this is going to be a service account. So the income account that should populate when you enter this into the system will be income. In other words, when you enter the invoice, it's going to enter an income account called service. Now we might need to change that once we upload it, but we're going to keep that for now because this is what came out of our. We're going to say this came out of our other accounting system basically, and then we're going to say the next one is going to be a partial service. And so again, when someone's making the invoice, they're going to say, "Oh, you had a partial service according to our, pamphlet. We have partial services as an option, and they are $100." And this is going to be go into the service account again. Service account, service type, service versus inventory type. And then we have a tune-up. So, okay, now you have a tune-up. It's going to be a 5-guitar tune-up. Not sure exactly, again. But that's going to cost $200, we're going to say. And that's a service. So now these are services. Rather than having basically an hourly price, we're saying, hey, these are going to be the service items that we're going to have. And we're going to say this is service. And there we have it. So I'm going to save that. And so we want to put this somewhere. We want to know where it is at. And then when we go back to, let's put this here. When we go back to QuickBooks, we are then going to browse and look for that file, import that file. And then we're going to make any adjustments we need to do. See if it lines up like it should. And that's how we're going to basically import that information. Once we do that, then it should be something that if we make then a new invoice and we open up our invoice, we send an invoice here. and then we want to populate that invoice, we should be able to go down here and all those service items, the diagnostic, the guitar full service, and the partial service, and the 5 guitar tune-up, the tune-ups, should all be down here. Those should be things that are fixed items. Instead of us, in other words, having to say it's going to be an hourly amount and picking the hour and the rate each time, we want to basically set those set service items. Now, the service items so far are a bit easier to populate. There was only 4 items that we really needed to set up the service items. Inventory items we'll set up in a similar process in a future presentation. It'll take a little bit longer to do that because we also have to track the inventory if we want to, which means we have to track the inventory and the related cost of goods sold, which will then also be populated or used. It won't show on the invoice, but the invoice will be used in order to calculate and track the inventory.